All right, guys, welcome back. And in today's episode, we'll be going over the Week 10 games for the NFL season and get my picks on each game. Before we get into things, I'm gonna do some Week 9 recap. And in Week 9, I went 9-5, and my lock of the week for the Rams to beat the Saints was correct. And then staying on Week 9, my Week 9 player of the week for last week's performance had to be Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers had 3 touchdowns. He had 12 receptions for 127 yards, and he had also one carry for 6 yards. But 3 touchdowns. I think after coming back from injury, he's cementing himself as probably one of the best tight ends in the league, behind like Trey McBride, George Kittle, etc. And I think that Brock Bowers' presence was felt, and I think the offense is only going to get better over time. I think Geno Smith now, without Jacoby Myers, who was traded at the deadline, Brock Bowers might get like 15 to 20 targets a game. So if you have him in fantasy, you are in big luck, and they're always going to be down in games, so they're always going to have to be passing the ball. So I wouldn't be surprised if we give Brock Bowers more player of the weeks. And then my Week 10 start of the week for fantasy football, I have Wandale Robinson versus the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears give up the 30th most fantasy points per game to receivers, and they just gave up 42 points last week. I think their defense is prone to giving up big plays and a lot of points. And I like how Wandale Robinson works from the slot, and I think you can get some easy catches. And if you're in a PPR format, I think Wandale Robinson's a must start. I think the Giants could potentially go down early, and I think Wandale Robinson's due for a lot of targets in that game. And then my last reminder before we get into my game picks, please remember to like and subscribe and comment, and that gives you a chance to enter into the big giveaway at the end of the year. If I'm not mistaken, right now the giveaway pots up to $100, and it's only going to grow throughout the season. Like I keep mentioning, this is the easiest giveaway you guys can enter. The more you comment on each video, the better chance you have to win at the end of the season. Our first matchup of Week 10 for Thursday Night Football, we have the Raiders versus the Broncos. I think the Broncos had another weak offensive performance last week, even though they beat the Texans, if I'm not mistaken. And that's what I'm trying to see if they can have their breakout game on offense. I think the Raiders are the perfect team. I think they have a pretty weak defense, and I think that they're prone to giving up big plays, and they don't have that good of a secondary. Like I said, I'm wondering if Bo Nix can take advantage of this week, and especially against Vegas, the secondary can have a big game, and how much will Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and Evan Ingram and everyone else, all the Denver pass catchers, are they going to have big games? And then staying on the Broncos, how are they going to distribute the touches between J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey? I feel as the year goes on, they're incorporating R.J. Harvey more. But J.K. Dobbins has had a very solid season, almost 700 rushing yards, 5.2 per attempt, 4 touchdowns on the season. He's no slouch, man. I think it would be tough for R.J. Harvey to win the job over him. I like how they have a two-headed backfield, and I think they should incorporate them like 50-50, 60-40 for Dobbins. I think you can only make their offense better. And then going over to the Raiders, can that Las Vegas rushing attack get it going against a tough defensive line? I think Genzi's in for a tough game. He gets a lot of attempts, but he's a little inefficient, under 4 yards per run. Still 3 touchdowns. I think with all the hype coming into him, he's had a lackluster season. No offense, from being honest. But I still think he has plenty of time. He's only 21 or 22. And I'm just curious to see if he can have a big game against a really tough defensive line. And then, like I always mention every single week, can Geno Smith limit the turnovers? 11 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. If he plays a turnover-free game, which is very hard for him to do, apparently, they have a good chance of winning the game. I think this is going to be a closer game than people expect. It's a divisional game. Taking everything into account, I just think that the Broncos are due for a big offensive bounce back. I think they've had 2 dud weeks, so I'm taking the Broncos in this Thursday night matchup. All right, next up, we got the 9:30 a.m. game on Saturday. Don't forget to wake up early. We have the Falcons playing the Colts. I think the Colts obviously had a disappointing performance last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought the Steelers shut down Jonathan Taylor really well, and I thought that they had a really good game plan to stop Daniel Jones. And no offense, turning back to the New York Giants, Daniel Jones. But I still think Daniel Jones is a very solid quarterback. I think he's playing like a top 10 quarterback this year. Every quarterback has a bad game, so I can't discredit him that much. But I'm just interested to see that Colts offense can get it going. And now our team's going to be watching the Steelers film and seeing how they defended Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Jones. And I'm interested to see how is Drake London going to fare against newly traded cornerback for the Colts, Sauce Gardner. I think I saw the report today that Sauce Gardner is planning to play. And I just feel like the Falcons' offense the past couple weeks has been a little lackluster, especially Bijan Robinson. I think he's had a pretty solid season so far. I just feel like he hasn't had like outstanding games like he did last year, so I'm interested to see if he can have a really good game against the Colts. I think that gives them a really good chance of their offensive playmakers like Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and Drake London have big games. But I just think the Colts are due for a big bounce back week. I think the Colts are ready to go. They're showing they're all in this season with trading for Sauce Gardner. So I didn't think it's going to be too much for the Falcons. I'm taking the Colts in this Week 10 matchup. All right, and next up we have the New Orleans Saints versus the Carolina Panthers. First 1 o'clock game on Sunday. And I'm interested to see how Tyler Shuck plays. I think this is his second career start. I thought he did some things well against the Rams. I just think that the Rams offense is too overpowered and too much for the Saints defense. I don't think the Saints defense really has a cornerback 1 nor a cornerback 2. And they were going up against Puka Nacua for most of the game until he got injured. And Devontae Adams hasn't shown any regression at all. And Matthew Stafford's been playing at an MVP level. And then the Panthers put off the big upset last week against the Packers. And I think that Rico Dowdle's continuing to run the ball. He didn't even start the season. He's top 5 in rushing yards, 735 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. It's averaging 5.6 yards per rush. That's outstanding. I think they signed him to a good contract when the Cowboys let go of him last offseason. And I think Tedero McMillan's had a very solid rookie year. And I like the direction that the Panthers are going in. But I'm going back over to the Saints. Can they incorporate their offensive playmakers with a rookie quarterback? I think Alvin Kamara's had a very lackluster season, and that could be due to poor quarterback play. I think Chris Olave has done pretty well with what he's dealing with his quarterback play. But I just think the Panthers are getting hot. Had a very big upset against the Packers, so I'm taking the Panthers in this Week 10 matchup. And next up, we have the New York Giants versus the Chicago Bears. And I'm interested to see in this matchup the 2 young quarterbacks, Jackson Dart versus Caleb Williams, for the first times in both their careers. I think Jackson Dart, ever since he started, looks like he has the it factor. I think over time and with age, he's going to progress better and better. And I think that Wandale Robinson's due for a big game, like I mentioned him earlier in the episode about how I think he's my start of the week. I think he's due for a lot of targets, and it's just going to be the matter of what he can do with them. And then going over to the Bears, I thought they played really well last week offensively, dropped 47 points. You can't ask for pretty much better performance. But if I told you before the game that they would drop 47 points and Rome Odunze would have 0 receptions for 0 yards, you would probably look at me and laugh and think I'm lying. But in reality, that's what happened. You would think that if you score 47 points, you're probably your best offensive playmaker, Rome Odunze. He would get a couple receptions, let alone 1. But besides the point, I'm interested to see how the Bears are going to go about DeAndre Swift versus Kyle Monangai. I think Kyle Monangai had a very good performance last week against the Bengals. Most teams give their rookies more opportunities in the back half of the season to see if they can get ready for the playoffs the next year, and I think Kyle Monangai stepped up. And I'm interested to see if DeAndre Swift's going to play this week. But I just trust the Bears defense a tad bit more than the Giants. I know they get 42 points, but I don't really trust Shane Bowen and the Giants defense. And I think Caleb Williams is playing outstanding this year. So I'm taking the Bears in this Week 10 matchup. All right, and next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. The one trade that I really liked during the trade deadline was the Jaguars acquiring Jacoby Myers. I thought that's a very good fit for a receiver that Trevor Lawrence can throw that gets open fast and is a very good route runner. I think the Jaguars have the talent in that receiver room to be a dominant receiving core with Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter, but now you add Jacoby Myers, but I just don't think they all fit each other well. And now I think it's a very good complementary trio. And you also have Diami Brown and Parker Washington. So I'm interested to see how they do against Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter. And I'm just interested to see if Jacoby Myers is going to play that much. And going over to the Texans, how is that O-line going to hold up against Josh Allen and Travon Walker? I think Travon Walker, if I'm not mistaken, last week got ejected for throwing a punch. So I'm sure he's not happy. He's ready to play. And I haven't really read into if C.J. Stroud's going to be playing this week. I'm assuming probably not. He had a pretty bad concussion. But it looked like Davis Mills got Nico Collins involved a lot in that game, and I like that. Nico Collins is a top 10 receiver. And I'm glad that Davis Mills throws the ball and uses him like that. I think the O-line played pretty solid last week, and I think it's getting better over time, but it's still a really bad O-line. I think the Texans are training in the right direction, but this is a very hard game for me to predict. This is one of the games where it's a toss-up to me. But I'm trusting the Jaguars a little bit more. I feel like I'm going to regret that. But I'm taking the Jaguars in this Week 10 matchup. All right, next up we have the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to keep this one pretty short and sweet. I think the Bills just had a huge performance against the Chiefs. I think the defense looked the best it's had. I think James Cook is one of the best running backs in the league right now. I think Josh Allen's playing like an MVP. And I just think that the Dolphins, they don't know their identity of their team. Surprised they didn't trade more of their aging veterans at the deadline. I didn't think they needed to trade really Jalen Waddle. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I think that he should be a core piece on your offense. Same with Devon Achane. But I don't know what the future holds for Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. Regardless of that, they traded away Jalen Phillips. So now it gives more time for Chop Robinson and Bradley Chubb. But still, I just think that this Dolphins defense is outmatched against this Bills offense. I think the Bills are going to rush all over them, pass all over them. I could see this game being a blowout, and I'm taking the Bills in this Week 10 matchup. All right, next up, this one's a very intriguing matchup to me. We have the Baltimore Ravens versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings had a very big win in an upset against the Detroit Lions. I get divisional games are always closer, and anyone can win those divisional games. That's why I like that. But I think that the Lions were clear favorites in last week's game. And I think that even though J.J. McCarthy threw for 140 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, I think he played well. I don't think he turned over the ball. And I think that if J.J. McCarthy can play turnover-free football, it gives the Vikings a better chance to win. I would just like to see Justin Jefferson involved a little bit more. He's still probably top 5 or top 10 receiving yards off the top of my head if I had to look. That's what I'm guessing. He's obviously a top 3 receiver in the league. You can argue he's number 1 with him, Jamar, and CD, and Puka. But I would just like to see him involved more in this offense. And then their defense had an outstanding game plan last week against the Lions. They just blitzed nonstop. It just looked like Jahmyr Gibbs cannot block the blitz at all. And I'm just interested to see they incorporate that against more teams that have running backs that you don't think can pick up blitzes. Derrick Henry's huge in size, so you would figure he can. I'm interested to see if Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson can get it going against a really good Vikings defensive line that stops and run well. I think this is a game where Zay Flowers might have to step up. I think the Baltimore rushing attack's like one of the best in the league, but it might be hindered this week against a really good defensive line. I think they held Jahmyr Gibbs to like under 30 rushing yards last week. I just think that J.J. McCarthy's due for a bad game. And I think the Ravens defense has been trending in the right direction ever since trading for Aloni Gilman. It frees up Kyle Hamilton to roam around the defense. And I just like how the Ravens are trending in the right direction, so I'm taking the Ravens in this Week 10 matchup. All right, next up, we have the Browns versus the Jets. Starting off with the Jets, actually. How is Justin Fields going to perform with most likely his job on the line? It sucks for him. He just lost 2 really good defenders on his defense. It doesn't really matter. He's on the offense, but still, I'm assuming the locker room is probably not happy if they're trading away 2 cornerstone players that have been drafted and been on the team for the past couple of years, and Sauce Gardner and Quinn Williams. Wasn't the biggest fan of the Sauce Gardner trade, nor the Quinn Williams trade. But I just think that if the big question is if the Jets can hit on the quarterback, they'll have multiple picks to fill out the roster. It's just hitting on the quarterback either this year or next year. But staying on this season, how is Justin Fields going to play with his job on the line? I think he's going to have a short leash. It has a bad first half or a bad first quarter. I could very well see them putting Tyrod Taylor in. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I saw some reports that Breece Hall requested a trade after seeing all the stuff that happened at the trade deadline. And I'm interested to see how that affects him throughout the rest of the season. He's on an expiring deal. He wants to prove that he's worth another contract to the team or to a different team. And then I think Garrett Wilson, although he has less than 400 yards, he hasn't played a couple games. I think Garrett Wilson's been playing fantastic given the circumstances. But like I said, I can't discredit Fields that much. I think he had a very good performance before their bye. So I'm hoping he can run that. I root for Justin Fields, and I think he's a good guy. So I'm always rooting for him. And then going over to the Browns, I think the Browns are just throwing out quarterbacks and Dylan Gabriel, and maybe later on in the season, God forbid, Shadur Sanders, just to see if any of them could be the future of the team. But I think they drafted really well this year with Quinshaw Judkins, Harold Fannin. I'm probably missing a couple people, Carson Schlesinger. But I just like this team's youth movement, and I thought they should have traded David Njoku if they could get a 3rd or 4th round pick potentially. But just like the Jets thing on this game, I'm just interested to see if even Quinshaw Judkins is going to play. I'm just interested to see just how the Jets team looks. I'm interested to see how the rushing defense looks if Judkins plays. And I'm interested to see who's the cornerback one going to be on that team now. Is it going to be Brandon Stevens, Azareé Thomas? I think they made a really good trade acquiring Jarvis Brownlee Jr. from the Titans. I think he's very underrated. This is another game that's pretty hard to predict. I think, no offense, they're both pretty bad teams. But I think the Jets locker room's probably cooked for the rest of the season. So I'm taking the Browns in this Week 10 matchup. All right, and next up, we have potentially game of the week. We have Drake May and the New England Patriots versus Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2 quarterbacks playing at an MVP level right now. Like I said, this game's going to be very hard to predict. I think both teams do stuff well. I think the Patriots are one of the hottest teams in the league right now. I think defensively they have a very sound and solid defense. And then going over to the Bucks, I feel like the last 2 or 3 weeks before their bye, their offense hasn't been the same. I think Emeka Egbuka slowed down a little bit, but that doesn't worry me at all. I don't know if they're going to get Bucky Irving or Chris Godwin back this week. I'm hoping they do, but Chris Godwin did not participate in practice on Wednesday, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Bucky Irving did as well. It feels like forever since we've seen them. And I think it's hard to view this Bucks team. It's just like how the Chiefs were a couple weeks ago. They just don't have all their players at full strength. They're not going to have Mike Evans probably most of the season. But I think if they can get back Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving, their offense will still be a top 5, top 10 offense in the league with how Baker Mayfield's playing. This is one of the hardest matchups for me to predict. But I think I'm going to take the Bucks. I just feel like the Patriots are due for a stinker. I feel like the Patriots are due to have a really bad game, and I hate saying that, but they just can't continue at this pace. So I'm taking the Bucks in this matchup, and I hope I don't regret it. All right, and next up we have the Arizona Cardinals versus the Seattle Seahawks. The big news coming out of this game is the Cardinals put Kyler Murray on the IR, so he's out for the next 4 games at least, and I think he's just going to be done for the season. It sucks to say Kyler Murray's time in Arizona is coming to an end, it looks like. He's still a pretty young quarterback, can still be a franchise quarterback. I'm just not the highest on the guy. And I think they've been playing better with Jacoby Brissett. And I just think that Jacoby Brissett incorporates offensive weapons a little bit more. Marvin Harrison had his best game of his career last week. And I think hopefully they're getting Trey Benson back this week or either next week. I just think that the Cardinals probably won't make the playoffs. I think they're already 3-5. It's going to be tough for them. And then go over to the Seahawks. The Seahawks just had a statement performance last week against the Commanders before Jaden Daniels went down. I'm not mistaken, they're up 28 points at halftime. JSN looked unstoppable. They just traded for former Saints receiver Rashid Shaheed. I'm interested to see how much he's involved in this game plan. They have the Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet duo at running back. And like I said, Sam Darnold's been playing at an elite MVP level this year as well. And I just think that Jackson Smith-Njigba and Sam Darnold have been playing at too good of a level. I think they're playing like the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the league right now. I just think it's too hard to pick against them. I don't really see anyone on that Arizona secondary that can guard them. Plus getting Rashid Shaheed, who's a field stretcher. I just like the Seahawks in this matchup. And it's just hard to pick Jacoby Brissett to beat a red-hot Seattle team. They're another team like the Patriots that are very hot. So I'm taking the Seahawks in this Week 10 matchup. All right, and next up we have the Los Angeles Rams versus the San Francisco 49ers. I'm interested to see how the Rams approach defending Christian McCaffrey. I think every single week we always mention how McCaffrey's leading the team in rushing yards and receiving yards. It's amazing how he has almost 170 attempts through 8 or 9 games, and he has 60-plus receptions through 8 or 9 games. He has 8 touchdowns on the season. A lot of people doubted Christian McCaffrey before the season started and how he can handle the workload, and I don't want to speak too soon. He's answered all the questions and proven a lot of people wrong. And then going over to the Rams, I'm interested to see if Puka Nacua is going to play. For my fantasy team's sakes, I'm hoping he's going to play. I think I saw the report earlier before I filmed this that Sean McVay said that Puka Nacua was most likely going to play. Another quarterback who's playing at an outstanding level right now is Matthew Stafford. I think he leads the league in touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, and only 2 interceptions and almost 2,200 passing yards. And Devontae Adams, I think 32, and has not shown any signs of regression. He's one of the best route runners in the league still. A very good red zone threat. Kyron Williams has been very solid this season as well. But talking about good quarterback play, I feel like Mac Jones has had a very solid season. I think maybe he could be a quarterback that a team could take in the offseason and revive his career like how Sam Darnold was, how Baker Mayfield was. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. And I wouldn't mind that. I think Mac Jones deserves another chance. I think he's been playing very solid this season given his circumstances. But I'm happy that the offense is getting healthier with getting George Kittle back a couple weeks ago. Hopefully they're getting Ricky Pearsall and Brock Purdy back soon. I just think the Rams are too out of a team right now. I think that there's no one on that Niner secondary that's going to be able to stop Puka and Devontae Adams. But I'm interested to see how a Sean McVay versus Kyle Shanahan matchup looks like. But I'm taking the Rams in this Week 10 matchup. All right, next up, we have my lock of the week matchup. We have the Lions versus the Commanders. I'm taking the Lions as my lock of the week. They just lost in not embarrassing fashion. They were the favorites. I think they're ready to come out and play this week. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is due for a big bounce-back week. I think it was his lowest rushing yards in a game for his career, even though he's only been in the league for 2 or 3 years now. I think Jared Goff's been playing pretty solid. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best receivers in the league. He's very consistent. You know what you're getting out of the guy. And then going to the Commanders, unfortunately, Jaden Daniels is out for most likely the next 4 to 6 games. I think Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt hasn't had the best of the seasons after all the hype he got preseason. I think he's been solid as like a a round 7 draft pick, but I just think that he started off very well and then has been pretty lackluster since then. Deebo Samuel, I think he's had a pretty solid season, only 367 receiving yards, but it's tough to do when you're the receiver 1 on that team with Terry McLaurin constantly being injured. Naturally, you're more of a receiver 2 and a receiver that, isn't the best at beating man press coverage and more of the receiver that, can catch screens and quick passes and break some plays, but he's being focused on as the receiver 1. And I just don't see how the Commanders win most of their games with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. No offense to him. I think he's a solid backup, but I just think this Lions team's ready to have a bounce-back performance. I think they're all due, and I think they're hungry to prove to everyone that they're still a top NFC team. I'm taking the Lions as my lock of the week. All right, and then we get our Sunday Night Football matchup. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the LA Chargers. And starting off with the Steelers, man, they're one of the hardest teams to gauge. They lose to the Bengals. They lose a lead they had against the Packers up until the first half, and then they blew it in the second half. And they go out there and they beat arguably the best team, the hottest team in the NFL, and statistically the best offense in the NFL, and their defense finally looks good. And I think Jaylen Warren had a very good game with 2 touchdowns. He didn't have the best rushing yards. But I just feel like this offense needs to incorporate DK Metcalf more, man. You just paid him like $30+ million, traded a second-round pick for him. And when I watch Steelers games, he's the clear receiver 1 on that team, and I just think you got to force feed him the ball. That'll lead to the success of this offense. I know they love their tight ends with Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, who's been getting involved more, and Jonnu Smith, who they traded for in that big trade in the offseason. But I just don't think their offense has been the main issue with this team. I think it's more the defense. And if their defense starts playing like how they did last week against the top offense in the league, it's hard to pick against them. And then going over to the Chargers, Joe Alt's out for the rest of the season after that sprain to his ankle, if I'm not mistaken. And they lost Rashawn Slater earlier in the season, unfortunately. So they don't have their 2 top tackles for the rest of the season. It's going to be hard for Justin Herbert. Hopefully they're getting Hampton back, but I just like the receiving core of Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Keenan Allen. I think they could take advantage of the weak Pittsburgh secondary, unless they play like how they've been playing recently, more like last game. And I think that's how they can win the game. But I just don't like how the Chargers don't have their 2 stars on their O-line. And I just think it's going to be hard for Justin Herbert to maneuver around the pocket and get clean pockets with that pretty solid Pittsburgh D-line. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, for one of the first times I'm going to say, is going to impress me. And I think they're going to make it hard for Justin Herbert. And I'm taking the Steelers in this Week 10 matchup. All right, and then our Monday Night Football game, our last game of the week, we have the Eagles versus the Packers. The Eagles were very big buyers at the deadline, traded for Jalen Phillips, Michael Carter, and Jair Alexander. And I don't think I'm forgetting anyone else. They invested heavily into their defense. I think they trust their offense with their offensive weapons with Hurts, Barkley, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, who's having a pretty fantastic season. And then going over to the Packers, they just lost Tucker Kraft for the season, unfortunately. His best season by far. Jordan Love's playing pretty good, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 2,000 passing yards. Josh Jacobs is a very volume-based running back who has 10 touchdowns. I just wish he was a little bit more efficient, but he's still one of the best running backs in the league. And I'm just waiting for Saquon Barkley to have a breakout game. Last season, he did one of the best running back seasons of all time. He almost ran for 2,000 rushing yards, and he's been a little lackluster this season. Not saying he's had a bad season, but I'm interested to see if A.J. Brown's going to play. I think he should. He missed the game before bye, and their offense looked pretty good. So I think their offense is trending in the right direction. And the Packers just had an embarrassing performance against the Panthers. I think they let bad teams hang on to the games too much. It's so hard. They're just like the Steelers. They're very hard to evaluate. On paper, they have all the talent. In certain games, they blow out teams and dominate, like how they beat the Lions in Week 1. If I'm not mistaken, I guess it's Week 1. But then they let the Panthers hang in the game. Their offense has been very lackluster. So it's such a hard team to predict. And I just think that the Eagles can win time possession in this game and make it damn near impossible for the Packers to make a comeback. And I think Jordan Love's better than Jalen Hurts, but I just think Jalen Hurts only 1 interception. Like I said, they're a run-heavy offense that can just win the time possession, even though the Packers' defense is a pretty good run defense, but they let Rico Dowdle run all over them. So it's harder to predict, and I think with all the investments into the Phillies' defense, I think their defense is naturally going to get better. So I'm picking the Eagles in this Week 10 matchup, but I could very well be wrong. All right, and that marks the end of the Week 10 game predictions. I appreciate you guys staying to the end of the video. And don't forget to like and subscribe to enter into the giveaway at the end of the year. I'm going to pick a random winner who comments, likes, and subscribes on the videos. And it's the easiest giveaway you guys can enter. And let me know what you guys think in the comments about what your team did during the trade deadline. And let me know if you think your team's going to win this week. All right, and I'll see you guys next week for Week 11 game predictions.